Well, good morning. It's Saturday, and it's time for another edition of Saturday with Seniors. It's brought to you each week by FCCB's local branches in Wellsboro, Mansfield, and Blossburg. Member FDIC. They've been a part of our community for over 150 years. And joining us in our studio, the day after Veterans Day, we have Frank Yungwirth joining us. You may know him as a teacher. He's also a Vietnam vet, and we're going to have so many interesting things to talk about. And I think you were born even here in Wellsboro, weren't you?
I was born up on Maple Hill where the tree farm is now, as a matter of fact.
Wow. How many years ago were you born?
I was born in 1945.
So you're going to make me do the math, huh? About 77. You haven't?
77.
I was going to say 77. Depends if you had your birthday yet this year.
October 4th, yep.
So what did your parents do for a living when you grew up?
My dad worked in a foundry, and we ran a farm. My dad wound up with TB, cancer later on. He died when I was 12.
Wow, that must have been challenging for... So you were the man of the house after that? Or you had
my older brothers were in the service.
Yeah, so you had to take on some responsibility pretty early in your life.
Early in the life, yeah. Didn't hurt me.
Obviously not. You've taken quite a leadership role in life. We'll talk about that coming up in a little bit. So tell me some more about when you were a kid. Was there electric out where you lived?
Oh, no.
Was there running water?
No running water, no.
No, obviously no TV.
Oh, no.
This is long before TV existed.
Had a Philco radio with a wire running from the house to the barn, and you might be able to pick up KDKA in Pittsburgh. That was it.
So if you wanted to get regional news back then, it was the radio from Pittsburgh, which really didn't cover what was going on.
No, there was none of that. You got your news from a party line on the phone.
Mm-hmm. That was your eavesdropping there.
Yep.
So people all know about Facebook, and that's how we find out about what their neighbor's doing or what's going on or whatever, who's in trouble. But 80 years before Facebook, there was something called party lines on the phone.
The party line was probably more accurate.
It probably was, because you heard it from the horse's mouth.
And you got all the gruesome details from every corner. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For those that aren't familiar with the party line, that would be one phone line. It was almost like we had four phones in the same house. Well, this is like having four phones in four different houses that all on the same line. They rang different.
I think there were 12 on our line. Yeah.
So only one out of the 12 houses could make a call at a time.
Yeah.
But 11 of the 12 could listen in if they wanted to.
Them. Just pick up the phone and say, okay, there's old Maudie. She's on the phone now.
Yep.
Hear a dog barking in the back. Oh, that's Gertrude. She's on the phone. Yeah, she's listening.
Yeah. Did people get mad if you were listening in on a call like that? Was it rude or was it just accepted?
That's what people did. Mm-hmm. You know. Now, I grew up in a multilingual family, and my mother, when she would talk to somebody, or my grandmother, and if they wanted to keep the
conversation private,
they'd lapse into the old country. Mm-hmm. And I can remember the cops showing up. This is 1952, 53. I was a little fella. Mm-hmm. And somebody turned them in. They were during the Red Scare and all that. But why, there's spies on the phone. My mother's talking to her sister or to her aunt.
Wanted to keep it private.
Yeah, in Slovak. And, of course, none of them there could speak Slovak, and it frustrated them because they couldn't
eavesdrop in on you, but you could on them.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So basically, a phone was about the only thing in your house that had a cord in it growing up.
Really, yeah.
So how'd you get your water? Did you have to have a hand pump?
Hand pump.
And you go out with a pail, and you had a pretty strong arm there, I imagine.
Yeah, we had cattle. That's the way you drew water for them, too.
Wow. So that hand pump got a lot of work.
Well, you had 2 wells, and part of your chores was go pump water for that. It was a half-hour slugging.
For how many cows? Was this a big farm?
Farms
were smaller then, right?
Probably had 15 head.
Yeah.
Average size farm back then. It was, they didn't have.
I can't imagine a farmer surviving with 15 cows now.
You go broke.
Wouldn't even be a hobby farm. It would be a money pit farm. Petting zoo, yeah. Did you use horses on the farm to do work?
It was right after the war, what I can remember, But before that, we all horses. But interesting, I think it's a little back into my own history. We look forward to fall because all the farmers got together and they do the thrashing and go from farm to farm to farm. Had one guy had a thrashing machine and and everybody show up. They'd get done with chores.
Kind of sort of like the Amish with the barn building where they all helped each other out. They all came together to...
And you waited for that time of year because you ate good for 2 weeks. You went from farm to farm to farm. The little kids, our job was, a lot of guys were still using horses. Our job was to make sure the water for the horses. So they'd bring the horses in, they'd tie them off, and we had to haul the hay for the horses, and they left them there overnight.
When you're saying you're how old? 5 or 6?
5 or 6
years old, you had responsibility of taking care of horses.
Oh, yeah.
Farms were dangerous for kids at that point.
They still are.
I mean, they still are, yes. You hear about injuries, but I imagine, were there many people that you knew in school that had lost a finger or anything in accidents?
I don't remember.
Or worse?
A lot of them come in bruises on them. Cow kicked them or a horse stepped on them, or
Yeah.
but we've gotten too soft.
Well, the
as a
world is
society.
everything's padded in this world,
Yeah.
I'm surprised they haven't padded the trees in the woods so we don't run into them.
I remember in high school playing football. I weighed 138 pounds playing center linebacker. Coaches loved the farm kids because they were too dumb not to tackle it. We had pretty good teams. When I went in the service, they said how tough basic training was. A bunch of my buddies went in together. We all had drafted at the same time. We were all farm kids. And basic training was a snap. Easiest job I ever had.
It's only half a day, only 12 hours a day.
Yeah, it was not before daylight till after dark. And they fed you 3 times a day, And as far as the physical exertion, what else are you going to do to go play? Because it was no challenge at all. You learn self-discipline on the farm.
Learn a lot of survival skills. I mean, like you said, you can get kicked by a cow or you can trip over something or whatever,
I think when I went in 1965, 66, I think there were 8 young men out of Wellsboro that were either in helicopters in Vietnam or were in the Air Force flyers. There were 8 pilots out of this little town.
Out of Wellsboro. Wow. We'll talk a little bit more. I want to talk a little more about your younger years, but then I definitely want to get into those years there. So in your house back, how did you light?
Kerosene lights. I still have them in the house when power goes out. I don't even work.
Yeah. And you heated with coal or wood?
Potbelly stove.
No coal stoker. Somebody had to keep feeding that thing.
You fed it. One side of you gets so hot you couldn't stand it, and the other side of the icicles would hang off you. There wasn't surround heat. But people want to go back to the good old days. No.
I don't think it'd be an interesting even like reality TV show to take some of today's 18-year-olds and see if they could survive for just a week in a home with no running water, no electricity, pump your own water, party line. They wouldn't have to dial the phone to begin with.
Survival skills, we learned that from a very, very early age that you made do with what you had. And nobody was rich. If somebody got a new car in the neighborhood, everybody ran out to see the new car. It was only 3 years old. So it wasn't a brand new one. It's new to the neighborhood. And that was the whole county. That wasn't just where I grew up.
Sure. Yeah, I've learned that from a lot of the people that have joined us on the show, that it was not, not every family even had a car. Then if they did, it was one car. It was very unusual to have 2 cars.
Yeah. And we've gotten soft in our old age. There's nothing wrong with that, mind you.
Yeah.
That we can live in a society where we can be that way. It's a wonderful thing.
Well, it's interesting. In 1940, the life expectancy was 62 years old. The average person lived in the United States. In 1960, it jumped to 70 years, and now it's 79 years. So from 1940 to now, we got 17 more years of life, and some of that is probably because the world is a little softer on our bodies.
And medical sciences.
Well, absolutely.
That's a whole nother discussion of the whole pharmaceutical business, because it's so skewed. I told my kids in class when I was teaching, I said, I'm the devil's advocate. Whatever you say, I'm going to take the other side of the argument and force you to think and justify what you're telling me.
That's called making people think.
My whole approach is prove it. Don't tell me something and you can't back it up.
So let's go back to you growing up.
I had some in-laws had just after the war, and a guy had just finished his military service. He married my aunt, and they needed a place to stay. So, of course, everybody come to the farm. And it's getting a little crowded here. So we rented a place in Arnott. My dad worked in Foundry.
You had said, yes.
So it was easy for him to get to work because the roads were open. Didn't have to pull through the snowbanks in the winter. So we stayed there. I went to Arnott School, 1 room, 5 grades. So
that's the museum, right? The history museum now?
Yep. Kids. I had 4 kids in my class, 3 in my sister.
4 kids in your class?
Yep, my grade.
Well, 2 boys, 2 girls?
I'm
trying to think how prom worked.
I can't remember. I think it was pretty well divided.
Yeah.
But
you obviously didn't have a basketball team.
It was 1 through 6, 1 through 5.
You got them all together. Okay, different.
But you talk about a 1-room school. Yeah, I actually went to a 1-room school. Then I wound up going to Charleston. We moved to Cherry Flats. And that was, again, the little school that's not there anymore. I think there were 10 of us in that grade. And 6th grade, we moved to Wellsboro. They consolidated schools in 1956. And the elementary stayed up where the Penn Tech or whatever it is up there.
Yeah, there's a church in there now, but the Penn College was there after.
Colleges, And 7 through 9, we come to Wellsboro too.
Yeah.
The same school we're in now. That was a big school, my God.
Yeah.
Never saw that many chairs and people.
Four
all
in
at
your
one
class
time.
in Arnott. So what was Arnott like? Was Arnott a bigger town then? I mean, I've heard
No,
stories
it
of it
was-
having been in the mining days. It was a bigger town, but I didn't know if it had
Yeah.
shrunk by then.
No,
Or
the mines had ended. I can remember, believe it or not, 1949, the last coal train that left Arnott.
you remember that?
I remember that train going down through by Booth's store and right behind them pulling up the tracks. Right across from the school in Arnott was the railroad station.
I didn't know there was a railroad station over there. Huh? Right across from where the school was, on the other side of the street.
Yeah, right across, and a train would come in and
Yeah.
class would shut down while he's shutting the engine down.
It was a steam engine at that time. Yeah.
It's like it was yesterday for me, but
Yeah.
you tell somebody that and says, "Oh, come on." Yeah.
Did you ever ride on a train in Tiger County? Did you ever,
No. The first train I was on was a troop train going from Philadelphia to Fort Jackson, South Carolina.
So let's, I guess we'll forward a little bit in your life here from Arnott to there to Wellsboro. And then where'd you go from there? After you graduated, did you get a car at that point? Tell me about any neat stories with cars
I finished school, and I knew I was getting drafted. We were getting our draft notices in high school. So that was a foregone conclusion. And I originally had intended to go in the Coast Guard. I had no intention of going in the Army, didn't want to be an infantryman. I thought the Air Force was sissies. Don't like water. Marine Corps, I just another glorified infantry. That was not it. So I was going to the Coast Guard. Nice, safe job. Took the tests, and they shared the information. Recruiter said, "How would you like to go to flight school?" I said, "Duh, what's that?" He said, "How would you like to learn to fly helicopters?" I said, "I can't even spell helicopter."
How old were you at this time?
18, just finished school.
Vietnam, the average soldier age was, I don't remember, you maybe know, but it was so young.
Yeah, well, during any war, they're young.
Yeah.
You can't put old men in war.
I think 17 was the average age in Vietnam, if I remember right.
Yeah, 17, 18.
Yeah. So they're asking an 18-year-old who can't spell helicopter if he wants to learn to fly a helicopter. And how long did you take to make this decision? Or you didn't get to decide? They said that's what you're going to do.
Well, I said, what's the advantages to this? He said, well, you get to be an officer. That didn't ring a bell with me. Says they pay a lot better. Now, that did. Mm-hmm. I said, okay. And you live good, They forgot to tell you, you also got shot at a lot more than anybody else.
You were a slower moving target.
Yeah, they didn't bother telling us that. The flight program was just building. So I had, I think, 13 months between when I enlisted and when I had an opening for training service. So I went to work for Ingersoll Rand and worked in a machine shop. And I assumed when I got out of the service, I'd go right back to the machine shop. Well, you never know where you're going in life. We started out with, I want to say, 387 candidates in my flight class. We graduated 124. They busted them out that fast. They were looking for the best of the best.
Yeah, 2/3 weren't there.
Yeah, out of that 124, I think 27 of us came back without Purple Hearts. And I think over half of my class was killed first tour.
Wow.
But I got back to the States. I was wounded. I spent several months in a hospital.
Wounded from a helicopter crash or from...
I was shot down last time, yeah. Like you said, I was shot down 7 times, but last one they had to carry me out of.
And when you say shot down, like how high up were you when you were...
Any place between 50 feet and 200.
And you can survive that 7
I did.
times?
I did, yeah. You can survive it.
I don't know that I can, but...
You're trained to master that machine, and you do it. These guys are so well trained that there's no surprises. Part of flight school was constant harassment. At least 12 hours a day is somebody breathing down your neck. And you do something right and it'd be wrong. You do it right and it'd still be wrong. You got so used to it that nothing they could throw at you could surprise you. We started flying. They dead sticked us. They'd cut the throttle on us. We shut the engine off on us. I shot 200 dead sticks before I got out of flight school. IP, just reach over and kill the engine. And you learn to put that thing on the ground any place. And you learn to fly with the idea in mind that you always had some place to put it on the ground, whether it was 10 feet away or half a mile away. Well, you didn't have a half mile because it had a 1-to-1 glide slope. Every foot forward, 1 foot down. So if you're at 500 feet, you had someplace within 500 feet.
That was your cone that you could drop into, and you didn't have a lot of time to decide which direction you're going, too. I think you couldn't go, no, we should go that way.
It had to be instantaneous, and you were trained to do that. There was no second guess, no, oh my God. You'd catch a mayday on the radio. Somebody hit, engine quit. It'd be a slow mayday, mayday, mayday. Call sign Silver 11, going down, here's my coordinates. And that's the last word you'd hear. And everybody that picking it up, because everybody was on guard frequency, he'd pick it up and everybody would immediately swing into that area to get him out if he could. And we did. We never left a guy. But there was no panic. It was, oh my God, No.
You learn fear was not affecting your behavior, which for any human otherwise, fear and anxiety would kick in to the point that they wouldn't act rational, but you did.
It was not a part of it. Somebody asked me what happened. What do you do when they start shooting at you? I said, keep on flying. What are you going to do? I don't know. You just keep on flying.
So how long were you flying in Vietnam? 7 times to be shot. Was this over what time period?
10 months.
So it was pretty routine then. I mean, it seems like every 6 weeks, if you spread it out average, you were hit.
I averaged bullet holes every third day.
Jeez.
And I quit counting after I had 300 bullet holes in the aircraft. I have no idea how many holes I had in airplanes.
That is amazing.
And it was normal. You could get shot at just lifting out of the bunker anytime on the mission. I was shot down twice in one day within 600 yards of each other.
Jeez.
Usually when you get shot down, they rest the day off, go get drunk.
Yeah. Well, you earned a drink, I'd say, at least at that point.
Oh, you learned to drink. Yeah, I was good at that for a long time.
So how long did you stay in the military after Vietnam?
I went back to active duty. I had a brace from my hip to my toes. I lost my right knee. It was blown to smithereens. And they patched it enough so they didn't amputate the leg. They tried 5 times to amputate it, and I argued them, fought them out of it. So I said, I'm going back to active duty. And they said, no, you can't do that. I said, why? He says, you can't walk. I was on crutches. I said, well, I'm not getting out. What are you going to do with me? So they sent me back to limited duty at Fort Walter. Fort Eustis that time. And first guy I met when I went in the officers club for dinner that night was a classmate of mine who was the instructor pilot, standardization pilot. I said, I need a check ride. He said, what do you need a check ride for? I said, I just got out of the hospital. I haven't flown in 6 months or 8 months, and I need a check ride. He looked at me and he said, you're nuts. I said, what? He says, you can't walk. I said, so what's that got to do with it? He says, you'll never get a flight physical. So, well, I'll go see the flight surgeon. He said, well, he's right over there at the next table. Go talk to him. Well, this poor flight surgeon couldn't drink. I bought him his second beer. And by the time he got done with that, he couldn't remember his name. But I got a flight physical.
There you go.
And I got back on flight status.
What made you so determined to want to get back to flying? Was it the love of this country? Was it the feeling of your camaraderie that you had to help your men out that you're with? What was the drive?
It's what you did.
I mean, you certainly were at the point where you could have said...
I could have walked anytime.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and respectably, beyond respectably at that point, but you...
I took a direct commission to first lieutenant on a fluke. I was a warrant officer at the time, and a couple of my friends were going up with the idea of staying in the service. And I went up to DA with them, but I was walking down the hall, and I was oohing and awing about this Pentagon. I'd never been in. It's pretty impressive building. And somebody yelled at me, Yungwirth. I said, oh, God. Every place is restricted there. I said, I'm going to the brig, sure in hell. I backed up, and here's this colonel sitting behind the desk. I had flown with him in Vietnam. He was assignment officer. He said, you're dead. I said, what? He said, I heard you were killed. I said, no, I'm shot up a little bit, but I wasn't killed. He said, you want a commission? I said, no, I'm getting out. As soon as my tour's up here, I'm going to pull my retirement and go. He says, if I offered you a commission, what would you take? I was 22 years old, understand? I'm being very facetious. I said, I would take captain. Now, nobody gets promoted off the board to captain. He said, now you're being stupid. He said, I'll give you first lieutenant and guarantee you captain in 11 months. Now, it's normally a 24-month waiting period. I said, even you can't do that. He said, hell if I can't.
He did?
I was commissioned within a month. I just made captain, had been accepted to test pilot school. I'd finished maintenance school.
Yep.
I was going back to Vietnam as a test pilot, and my orders come down. My medical records caught up to me, and they grounded me. They were sending me back to Vietnam anyway as a grounded maintenance officer. No, this is where we part company.
Yep.
Well, an old drinking partner of mine was the senior surgeon. I called him. I said, I think I just got screwed. He says, no, what happened? I told him. He said, no, you're on medical hold as of right now. And immediately, he said, I want to look at that leg anyway. So he opened the leg back up. He took 123 pieces of shrapnel and bone chip out of it the second time.
Whew.
And he says, now you're getting out. That was my departure from the Army.
That is a fascinating story. Holy cow. We don't have a ton of time left, but you became a teacher, too, somewhere through this whole thing as well. Yeah. And there's a lot of years between.
I got back to Wellsboro, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I got a knock on her door, and a guy in a suit showed up, and he said, I'm from the VA. He says, where are you going to college? I hadn't thought about it. He said, well, we pay books and tuition and $500 a month stipend. I said, you what? He says, your books, tuition. Hell, I couldn't pass a college entrance board. He said, don't take one. You don't have to.
The GI Bill, as we call it now, I think.
Yep. So I wound up going to Mansfield and had no intention of teaching. But it was $500 a month to go to school. So
again, like you said in life, you don't never know where things are going to take you, whose shoes you shouldn't spit on. So
And I spent 10 years working in the woods. No intention of teaching school. My son come home one day from school and he says, Dad, they need a history teacher. So maybe I'll go up and see him. So I went up. Clifford Ruin was the principal. I walked in, and I was still in my Carhartts, getting ready to go to the woods. He says, do you know Mr. Coder? Mr. Coder was the ag teacher. I said, yeah, Ernie was my crew chief in Vietnam. He and I flew together for 8 months. And that's another story, how we got back together. But he says, you be here tomorrow. And that's how I got hired. They weren't looking for a teacher at that time. They had a class that was out of control. The substitutes had been there. They needed a disciplinarian or somebody that could get the thing under control. So next morning, I was shaved and teaching school, and I spent 25 years there.
So where did you teach? Which school?
I taught here in Wellsboro.
Wellsboro School for 25 years?
Yep.
So there's a lot of people that probably know you as Mr. Yungwirth.
Yep. Mr. Y.
Mr. Y, you still how you run into people still that call you by Mr. They still don't.
Oh yeah, they all do.
Yeah.
Nobody calls me by my first name. It's always Mr. Yungwirth or Mr. Y.
Yeah.
My wife goes crazy. We'll stop at say Walmart.
Yeah.
He says, "How come it takes you 2 hours to get out of Walmart?" Because it takes me 2 hours to talk to everybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
Show the pictures of their kids and their grandkids. You know, I love teaching. I would teach today, but I couldn't handle the administration. It started getting stupid when I got out. And I guess it's worse now. And I don't blame the administrators.
It's hard to say where do you blame it. You know, if parents aren't teaching kids discipline, I don't think they don't have allowances, they don't have responsibility, they don't have chores. So kids are coming into school with a different level of what they were, you know, like you were saying, at 5 years old, you were in charge of horses or cows. And I think a lot of you got state regulations and federal regulations, and everybody points the finger at somebody else because there's no one place to point at.
A lot of my friends that taught when I was there, several of them were ex-servicemen, couldn't handle it anymore. You yell at somebody and you have a lawsuit. It's not the kids' fault. The kids don't know any better.
I don't know what the solution is, and that could be a whole nother show that you all can come back and talk if you want.
I could go on for hours for that.
But I think we got to wrap things up here. This has been very interesting. Thank you for sharing your story with us.
Well, I thank you for having me.
Frank Yungwirth joins us here on Saturday with Seniors. It's all been brought to you by our local branches of FCCB in Wellsboro, Mansfield, and Blossburg, serving our community for over 150